Hello, conscious leaders. I am very excited to be connecting with you today through this online class. And I want to welcome you and thank you for choosing to download and watch this presentation. My name is Joelle Jackson, and I am a conscious leadership coach. I help individuals and groups liberate themselves from the status quo. The way I define the status quo is it is anything that might be holding you back from achieving your goals and manifesting your dreams. It's also anything that might be holding you back from feeling happy, successful, and fulfilled. Sometimes these things that are holding us back might be internal, and other times they might be external to us. And sometimes they are a combination of both. Whatever they may be, by working with me, you will gain more clarity on them and reclaim your power to liberate yourself from them in order to achieve or manifest your goals and your dreams. I earned my certification as a professional coach from the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, iPEC. And I've also earned my coaching credentials from the International Coach Federation, ICF. As a coach, I am deeply inspired by iPEC Coaching's 33 foundation principles and the energy leadership coaching model which I use in my practice. I credit iPEC for opening my eyes to amazing new possibilities in self-development and self-improvement. You can learn more about me by accessing my website, joellejackson.com, or by following me on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And please do remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The links to those pages, my social media pages, are available on my website for your convenience. This presentation is comprised of 3 videos or 3 parts that will be offered on 3 separate videos. In the first part, I will cover the fundamental elements of conscious living. In the second part of this presentation, I will define consciousness and conscious leadership. And in the third and final part of this presentation, I will describe the 7 levels of consciousness and how your life or our life and how we experience it is a reflection of which level of consciousness we decide to live from. Welcome to part 1 of this presentation, the fundamental elements of conscious living. To begin, I'd like to ask you this question. What is conscious living? Take a moment or two to reflect on this question and maybe jot down your ideas. And feel free to pause this presentation to do that. The most fundamental element or basic practice of conscious living is to be self-aware. Self-awareness denotes being aware of our thoughts, the quality of our thoughts, and the power that our thoughts have on us. It is also the power that our thoughts have on our emotions and on our actions. To be self-aware is also to take the time to honor our emotions and to choose feelings that serve our highest good. When we are self-aware, we also begin to make choices on whether we want to react or respond to situations in our life, which is another characteristic of conscious living or another element of conscious living. Usually responding takes a lot more effort because unlike reacting, responding allows us to check in with ourselves first to see if what we think, feel, or do is in our highest good and the highest good of those around us. Responding also allows us to check in with ourselves to see if what we think, feel, or do is in alignment with our values, which brings me to the next bullet point. Because to live consciously is to also live in alignment with our values. Whenever we live in misalignment with our values, we feel out of balance, and this usually leads us to unhappiness, frustration, and a myriad of negative emotions and feelings. The question to ask yourself here is, what are the values that you hold dearly, and how aligned are you with them? The question that I have for you also is, When was the last time you've identified those values and checked to see how aligned you are with them? On my website, I offer a free values assessment to help you identify your values and assess how well aligned you are with them. And you can find this assessment on the same page where you downloaded this presentation. If you happen to have any questions regarding the values assessment or need any help with it, please reach out to me directly. Next, to live consciously is to also live with the belief and knowledge that you are worthy and you are loved. Being worthy and loved are aspects of our existence that we struggle to come to terms with. Because maybe more importantly, or at the most important factor that plays into it here is our belief system and how we were raised and how our values were developed at an early age in our life, during our childhood. But again, it's because we are seeking outside validation and reassurance on being worthy and loved at a time when we are born worthy and loved. We come from the same loving energy that created the universe. Whatever label you want to put on that energy, go ahead, it doesn't really matter. Because the point here is that this infinite intelligence created you and loves you unconditionally and considers you worthy. When we live with this knowledge and belief, we live consciously. This is critical whenever we're faced with difficulty, challenges, or disappointment, or even conflict and misunderstandings. Because instead of berating ourselves or others for what is and what went wrong, which is usually coming from a place of not feeling worthy and not feeling loved and is a place of low consciousness living, we instead try to shift into self-love, compassion, and kindness. This enables us to be our best self and to make conscious choices, and that is conscious living. Last but not least on the list is that to live consciously is to also live with the knowledge that we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions, and we are not our actions. We are the pure awareness observing these thoughts and emotions and actions. We all have a tendency to identify with a particular emotion and mental or physical state. We say things like, I am upset, or I am confused, or I am tired. But who is the I behind the I am, or in the I am? We can only understand that when we begin to consider or to discover that we are pure awareness. As pure awareness, we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions, and we are not our mental state. In my coaching practice, because I'm sure you're wondering, well, how can I figure that out? In my coaching practice, I use various methods and exercises with my clients to help them shift into pure awareness. And this enables them usually to get unstuck from an emotion, belief, or thought that is not allowing them to be in an elevated state of consciousness where they can be basically, which is synonymous with living consciously. So moving on, what would you say is the least common denominator in conscious living? Take a few moments to also reflect on this question and feel free to pause the presentation if you'd like to. Now that you've thought about it, the answer is that the least common denominator is thoughts. Your thoughts create your life. Isn't it true that thoughts trigger emotions and feelings? And in turn, emotions and feelings trigger behavior and actions. And it's your behaviors and actions that result in the outcomes. The interesting thing that I want to share with you is that according to neuroscientists, most of our thoughts are unconscious. Some even say that up to anywhere between 88 to 98% of our thoughts are unconscious. To have this much unconscious thinking or unconscious thoughts is to give our power away in the way we create our reality. If you are unhappy with your personal reality or the general collective reality that you're part of, then you'll need to make more of your thoughts conscious. Only then will you be able to begin your journey to conscious living. And one of my favorite quotes actually on this point is by Albert Einstein. Einstein knew the power of our thoughts in creating our reality, not only on the individual level, but also on the collective level, which led him to make the statement, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." So next, who has consciousness? In the previous slide, I pointed out that our individual consciousness is made up of our thoughts, combined with our emotions and feelings, as well as our behaviors and actions. As individual human beings, we have a unique individual consciousness. But in addition to the individual consciousness, societies and countries also have their own collective consciousness, their unique collective consciousness, which represents the sum of all the disparate units of individual consciousness that belong to that collective. The collective consciousness is comprised of public constructs combined with beliefs and opinions, as well as public sentiments and patterns of behaviors and actions for that collective. This all results in or produces the realities that nations, communities, and even on a smaller scale, an organization or organizations create for themselves. This is actually something very important to keep in mind in the context of what is the root cause of what we experience as a collective. If we want to change our collective experience, we will need to change our collective consciousness. And a question to pose to yourself here is, what is the collective attitude of my community, my country, or my organization? This would be very telling in terms of where you are and where you are heading as a collective. This will also give you the clarity on what needs to change in the collective consciousness to change the outcome. In fact, these same questions you can ask yourself in terms of your own personal consciousness. If you wish, you can pause this presentation and take some time to reflect on these questions. Self-awareness, as you saw in an earlier slide, is the bedrock of conscious living. In fact, it is the first step on the journey to being conscious. Self-awareness enables us to get a closer and clearer look at our thoughts, emotions, feelings, and physical state in general. If you're wondering how to do that, I recommend inner selfies. Yes, the same way we take inner selfies of our outer appearance, we can take inner selfies of our inner state of consciousness. How about we try one right now? If yes, please turn off all distractions and find a quiet spot and take a moment to center yourself. When you're ready, please close your eyes. When you're all centered by breathing in and out deeply and steadily, please direct your attention inward and observe. Observe your thoughts, observe your emotions, and observe your physical state. To help you get into that state of observation, look at what's on your mind. Is there something that always keeps coming up for you? Reflect on how you feel. Scan your body for any pain or specific feelings. Now try to capture with your inner camera, your mind's eye, everything you're seeing. Take your inner selfie. Your inner selfie should be able to reflect back to you your current thoughts, your current emotions and feelings, as well as your current state of consciousness. Now that you've taken your inner selfie, what are your first impressions? What do you think? How do you feel? You may now open your eyes. Inner selfies give us power over our entire consciousness through self-awareness. They are very important in helping us jumpstart our journey of conscious living. They are also a tool to become more self-aware. Because by raising our awareness, we acquire the knowledge we need about ourselves to begin to make more empowered and conscious choices to shift our consciousness and change our lives. In contrast, living unaware is living without the knowledge of who we are, what makes up our personal consciousness, and how that is affecting our lives on a daily basis. That would be what I referred to at the beginning of this presentation in the introduction as being in the status quo. There's a lot at stake when living unaware. Without awareness, we cannot affect any change in our life in any aspect of our life that we might find ourselves stuck in. And on this topic, I want to share with you 2 quotes that convey the thoughts here succinctly. They are from 2 individuals that have left their mark, a great mark on how we understand the human consciousness. The first one is by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The second quote is actually also by Einstein. Einstein said, "You cannot solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created them." How do these quotes resonate with you? What's your takeaway? I cannot emphasize enough how empowering inner selfies are. 1, they give us power over our thoughts. Power to choose which kinds of thoughts we want to have, so that if they're not serving us, we can change them. Self-awareness allows us to observe the thoughts that are running through the monkey mind. And then we begin to evaluate our thoughts and choose thoughts that are more supportive of our well-being. Also, self-awareness allows us to closely examine our beliefs that generate many of our powerful thoughts. Some thoughts could be creating inner blocks that put us in a contracted state and that debilitate our ability to live consciously, while other thoughts put us in an expanded or elevated state that allows us to co-create our lives with ease and with freedom. With awareness of who we are on the inside through the inner selfie, we gain the power to create new and empowering beliefs or new dominant positive thoughts that allow us to be in an expanded state of consciousness to override our old beliefs and blocks that were keeping us stuck in the status quo. 2, inner selfies give us power over our emotions, also through self-awareness. We begin to choose, when we are self-aware, to respond and not to react to situations, like I mentioned earlier. And responding instead of reacting, as I mentioned earlier as well, is a characteristic of conscious living. It is also what some use to define emotional intelligence. When we are consciously choosing our emotions, we begin to choose emotions that are more positive and that not only put us in a better state of consciousness, they also inspire and motivate us to be our best self. And the magic actually happens when our new emotional state makes us positive change agents in our personal environment. In the field of emotional intelligence, they actually have something called emotional contagion that centers around the fact that human emotions are contagious. When we are in a negative emotional state, we emote negative emotional contagion, and the opposite is also true. This is why leaders who are generally positive tend to be more influential and more motivating and more inspiring, not only towards other people, but also towards themselves to be their best self. That's why I call them conscious leaders, and I will explain what I mean by that a little bit more later. In terms of emotions, inner selfies give us the power to choose through awareness also which hormone we want to live with on a daily basis. Do we want to live with a constant drip of adrenaline and cortisol, or with a constant flow of dopamine and oxytocin? For those of you who know a little bit more about human hormones, you would know that cortisol and adrenaline are the stress hormone, and they're harmful to us in the long run. While oxytocin and dopamine are the happiness hormone, and they are very good for the body in many ways. So by taking an inner selfie, we would be giving ourselves the power to regulate these hormones in our body. Inner selfies also empower us at the level of our behaviors and actions. Typically, when we live with very low levels of self-awareness, we tend to react instead of responding to difficulties and challenges. With self-awareness, we take back our power instead of giving it away through stress, frustration, anger, withdrawal, or conflict. And inner selfies, through the power of self-awareness, allow us to act from a place of being in charge, more centered, more clear-headed. And our actions tend to carry a lot of wisdom in them. They tend to be positive, and they tend to be for our highest good and the highest good of others. Because we own our power and are not giving it away by being at the mercy of the impulses created by our thoughts and emotions, we begin to create the ideal outcomes we want in life. So in conclusion, so far, in terms of how inner selfies empower us, they give us power through self-awareness over our thoughts, over our emotions and our feelings, as well as over our actions and behavior, which in turn ends up resulting in consciously creating our life. This is conscious living. With that in mind, and knowing that inner selfies open the door for you to become more aware and gain the power over your thoughts, emotions, and feelings, as well as your actions and behaviors, what do you want to do with this information? To help you out, I'm offering some questions for you to reflect on that might be able to help you come up with some next steps. How does your current reality look like? How does your ideal life look like? How does your current reality match up with your ideal life? What do you think is missing? Please take some time to reflect on these questions and write down any ideas that might come up for you. We have now reached the end of part 1 of this presentation. And here's a quick recap of what we've covered so far. You can use this as an exercise to test your knowledge. Feel free to pause this presentation to go through these questions and the ensuing answers.